Did you pick up the phone and call him and say, hey, I know I've been harboring a resentment and I am now kind of over it?
I haven't done that.
No.
I haven't done that. I'd like to do it on, national.
For years, fans believed Mike Myers and Dana Carvey shared a friendship that comedy itself couldn't break. From endless laughs behind the scenes to the massive success of Wayne's World, they looked like an unshakable duo, two minds perfectly in sync. But Hollywood smiles often hide silent distances. Now, at 62, Mike Myers has finally confirmed the truth fans never saw coming. He and Dana Carvey are no longer friends. What caused the bond to fade? Was it fame, ego, or something far more personal? The real story behind this fallout is far more emotional and surprising than anyone imagined. And once you hear it, you'll never look at their legendary partnership the same way again. It began with something so small it almost felt invisible. A pinky finger, raised near the mouth during the long nights at Saturday Night Live. Back then, Dana Carvey was the quiet assassin of impressions, endlessly precise, endlessly funny. Off camera, he had a secret routine the audience never saw, a private imitation of their boss, Lorne Michaels. It was never meant for sketches or applause. It lived backstage, a pressure release valve for exhausted writers and cast members. The cadence was slow, the pauses heavy with judgment, the voice hushed and deliberate. And there was that pinky, Carvey's own exaggerated flourish, added to mock the already theatrical nature of Michaels's presence, gently. Everyone in the room knew it. Everyone laughed, including Mike Myers. Years later, Myers left SNL and exploded onto the world stage with Austin Powers. The films were outrageous, colorful, and wildly successful. But buried inside that success was a character that made Carvey's heart sink. Dr. Evil. The voice, the rhythm, the pauses, and unmistakably, the pinky finger. It felt hauntingly familiar. Too familiar. For a long time, Carvey said nothing. Silence felt safer. Lorne Michaels had given him his start. Myers was a former castmate, someone he'd shared creative trenches with, late rehearsals, early call times, the strange intimacy of live television. Speaking up risked looking bitter, disloyal, even petty. So Carvey swallowed the feeling and moved on publicly, even as something unresolved lingered privately. It wasn't until years later, in a 2016 interview, that Carvey finally gave voice to what fans had quietly speculated for decades. He admitted he believed Myers had taken that private backstage impression and transformed it into one of the most famous comedy villains of all time, without acknowledgement. He spoke gently, carefully, almost apologetically. There was no rage in his words, just a reflection. Carvey explained that impressions are a strange art. Once someone unlocks the essence of a person, it becomes contagious. Anyone can pick it up. Still, when he first saw the character, he felt a pause inside himself, a moment of recognition that hurt. He laughed it off, but the laughter carried weight. Not anger, something closer to sadness. When asked if he ever confronted Myers, Carvey deflected with humor, joking that he worked it out in therapy instead. It was funny, but it also revealed the truth beneath the joke. Some wounds don't explode. They quietly settle. They become things you learn to live around rather than heal. What made the story so haunting wasn't accusation. It was restraint. Two comedians who shaped a generation. One skyrocketed into global fame. The other carried a private disappointment with grace. And in that tiny pinky gesture lived a much larger story about creativity, ownership, silence, and the invisible fractures that form even among people who once laughed together in the same room. Carvey later admitted their connection had never been simple. "We were like siblings, a little bit," he said, and like most sibling bonds, it carried warmth and rivalry in equal measure. They were never designed to be a classic comedy duo. Wayne's World began as an idea Mike Myers had written himself, and when he invited Carvey in, something magical happened. Together, they captured a kind of accidental perfection. Wayne and Garth felt effortless, almost childishly pure, and audiences believed the chemistry was real. But off-screen, it wasn't that easy. The harmony people saw under the studio lights didn't extend backstage. There was competition, unspoken tension, and a growing awareness that Myers was steering the ship, while Carvey was riding in the passenger seat. By the time the second Wayne's World film wrapped, the air between them felt heavy, like something unfinished had been left unsaid. Then Austin Powers arrived, then Dr. Evil. And with that, Carvey quietly understood his place had shifted. No matter how many sketches they'd nailed together, or how many fans they'd greeted side by side, he wasn't inside Myers's creative inner world anymore. Maybe he never truly had been. What followed wasn't a dramatic fallout. There were no public arguments, no bitter interviews traded back and forth. Just distance. Years passed with little more than polite nods at reunions, brief smiles at award shows. Two men who once shared the same stage now feeling like acquaintances who knew each other too well to talk. Carvey tried to make peace with it. Years later, he said he'd let it go. Still, he admitted, "We never really talked about it." The hurt didn't vanish. It simply settled, forming a scar that stopped bleeding but never disappeared. Then came the 2019 Oscars. Hollywood wanted nostalgia. Myers and Carvey were asked to step back into Wayne and Garth one last time. The moment was playful, the jokes knowingly silly, the suits as tight as ever. But backstage, holding guitars again, something softened. For a brief moment, the weight lifted. As Carvey later reflected, it was good, quietly, unexpectedly good, to stand beside someone who had been part of your life for so long, even if the road between you had never been smooth. Carvey later summed it up with quiet honesty. Maybe not a perfect friendship, maybe not even an easy one, but a shared history that neither of them could erase. That history pulled them back together, at least briefly. In 2021, they reunited for a Super Bowl commercial, trading jokes alongside Cardi B, spending more time together than they had in years. From the outside, it looked like a full-circle moment. In interviews, Carvey tried to frame it as a happy ending. He spoke of things coming back around, telling Stern they had grown very, very close again, bound by too many memories to ignore. The words sounded reassuring, even optimistic. But beneath them, there was still a pause, a careful choice of phrasing that hinted at something unresolved. When he talked about Wayne's World, about those early breakthroughs and firsts, he always spoke in the past tense, not what they were building now, but what they had once shared. Mike Myers, meanwhile, never directly addressed the Dr. Evil question. That silence became part of the story. He has always been guarded, stepping away from Hollywood for long stretches, protecting his private life, choosing projects sparingly. He's someone who builds distance instinctively, then acts surprised when others feel shut out. Over time, that pattern may have become easier for Carvey to understand, if not fully accept. Perhaps that was the real reconciliation, not a heartfelt confession or public apology, but acceptance. The realization that not every bond is meant to last forever. That some people aren't built for lifelong closeness. Maybe friendship, in this case, meant sharing the spotlight when it made sense, smiling for the cameras, slipping back into familiar roles, and then going home separately. Today, they're cordial. They can laugh together at events. They can bring Wayne and Garth back to life when nostalgia calls. But best friends? Not anymore. Maybe never again. For all the jokes, all the guitars, all the head-banging moments crammed into that tiny car, Mike Myers and Dana Carvey had already drifted apart long before anyone noticed. And some stories, no matter how beloved, don't come with a rewind button. Mike Myers seemed destined for performance almost from the moment he could stand in front of a camera. At just 2 years old, he was already appearing in commercials, absorbing the rhythms of acting long before he could understand them. By the time he was 10, he shared the screen in a public service ad with Gilda Radner playing his mother, a fleeting moment that quietly linked two future comedy legends. As a teenager, small television roles followed, including early appearances on Canadian series that gave him his first taste of storytelling on screen. After high school, Myers chose comedy over convention. He earned a spot in the Second City's Canadian touring company, a turning point that carried him across the Atlantic. In London, he helped form an improvisational troupe at the Comedy Store, immersing himself in late-night performances where risk and spontaneity ruled. Around the same time, he appeared on British children's television, cleverly undercutting cheerful formats with dry, subversive humor that hinted at his future style. Returning to Canada in the mid-1980s, Myers rejoined Second City in Toronto before moving to Chicago, where he trained, performed, and even taught improvisation. It was during these years that his most famous creation began to take shape. The character of Wayne Campbell appeared repeatedly on Canadian television, loud, awkward, earnest, and unmistakably human. Wayne lived in music videos, sketch shows, and late-night broadcasts, slowly evolving into something bigger. Another oddball duo he created during this era would later resurface on Saturday Night Live as Sprockets. Proof that Myers was quietly building a comic universe long before the world noticed. Looking back, these early years feel like a mosaic. Small roles, restless travel, endless stages, all leading toward a breakout that seemed sudden, but was anything but. Mike Myers stepped onto the big screen in the early 1990s when a loud, awkward, head-banging sketch made the risky leap from late-night television to cinemas. The result became one of the decade's defining comedies, an unexpected cultural lightning bolt that turned Myers into a movie star almost overnight. A sequel followed quickly, and within the same year, he proved he could stretch beyond broad laughs with a dark romantic comedy that hinted at a more eccentric edge beneath the silliness. Then, just as momentum peaked, Myers disappeared. After leaving sketch television, he took a quiet step back, retreating from the spotlight for nearly 2 years. When he returned, it was with a character who felt both absurd and strangely precise, a swaggering spy parody wrapped in British affectations. That film exploded into a franchise, and Myers vanished behind multiple faces, the hero, the villain, and an ever-growing gallery of grotesque side characters. It was hilarious, exhausting, and wildly successful, but it also locked him into a very specific kind of fame. In between the laughs, he took risks that didn't always land. A dramatic turn portraying a real-life nightclub kingpin earned some respect but little commercial reward. Legal battles and studio pressure followed, eventually steering him into a children's film that arrived burdened by expectation and left bruised by criticism. Around the same time, he quietly reshaped animation history by giving voice to an ogre who became one of the most recognizable characters of a generation, returning to that role again and again as the franchise grew. Awards came, along with misfires, long silences, and cautious comebacks. He experimented with writing, producing, directing, music, and television disguises so elaborate they hid him in plain sight. Years would pass without a major film. Then suddenly he'd reappear, older, subtler, still oddly guarded. Today, his career reads like a series of peaks and pauses, massive cultural moments followed by deliberate retreats. Myers never chased constant visibility. Instead, he left echoes, characters, voices, and catchphrases that linger long after he stepped back, reminding audiences that comedy, like memory, rarely moves in a straight line. Mike Myers' romantic life unfolded much like his career, marked by chance moments, deep attachments, and quiet endings. In the late 1980s, while still finding his footing in comedy, he met actress and comedy writer Robin Rouzan at a Chicago hockey game. Fate intervened when a stray puck landed in his hands, giving him the perfect excuse to speak to her. What followed was a relationship rooted in creativity and shared humor. They married in the spring of 1993, and for years Rouzan was more than a partner. She was a source of inspiration, someone Myers later described as his creative anchor. But time has a way of softening even the strongest bonds. After more than a decade together, their marriage quietly came to an end in late 2005, leaving behind memories rather than drama. A new chapter began not long after. By 2006, Myers was linked to Kelly Tisdale, a scenic artist whose life behind the scenes mirrored his growing desire for privacy. They married years later in an intimate New York ceremony, far from cameras and fanfare. Together, they built a family, 3 children, and a life centered away from the noise of fame. Settled in Manhattan, Myers seemed to choose stillness over spectacle, carrying the echoes of past loves while embracing the quieter comfort of the present.